chains and Midnight. That's going to make Cardano the largest AVS system in the world. So people like Eigenlayer, Optimistic, Carrick, they're working in that space, and they've already brought tens of billions of dollars of locked value as a result of restaking. This allows us to sell Ouroboros as services to secure other blockchains. And we have the best security model of any blockchain, I would argue. So that's a very valuable asset, which is going to bring billions of dollars of annual revenue to the stake pool operators and to the ADA holders, starting with Midnight. So we're really excited to bring that in. The airdrop of Midnight, we've been able to filter it down to useful accounts. So about 37 million users will be eligible from the account space of Bitcoin, Ethereum, Solana, Avalanche, BNB, let's see here, BATS, Cardano, and XRP. So this is going to build bridges with all of those different ecosystems. It's going to bring chain abstraction with all those different ecosystems. It's going to bring a lot of use and utility for technologies like Babel fees. So this is going to bring a ton of transaction volume into Cardano, and it's just the first of many partner chains to come as projects on Cardano upgrade in that direction and projects migrate to Cardano to use that framework. So those two pillars, I think, are going to bring a lot of users in, a lot of activity in, and make Cardano one of the most utilized blockchains over the next 3 years.
もう一つは、そのリステーキングというそのコンセプトを使った、そのウロボロスを、いろんなブロックチェーンの方々が使って、そこにステーキングをすることによるSPO への収入というのも劇的に高まってくるとも思いますし、ポテンシャルでいうと、そのいろんな数々のブロックチェーンのユーザーがこの同じメカニズムを使うことによって、3700万人ぐらいの新しいユーザーというのが今後3年間ぐらいの中で入ってくるということが、仮説ですけれども、今現状そういった計算ができています。
So one last thing to mention, Hydra is an amazing technology, as we saw with Hydra Doom, and I'm very excited about people like Lunar Labs exploring it, Midgard exploring it, Gummy Worm exploring it through Sunday, and my goal is to see Hydra merge with the Lightning Network at some point, and my goal is to see Hydra become utilized for rollups and micropayments and games. And I think there's a humongous design space there. One example I like giving is there's a very high probability that X.com, Elon Musk's platform, is going to integrate a cryptocurrency wallet and start doing tweet tipping, amongst other things, to about 500 million users. And I think that's an example of a perfect use case for Hydra technology. So there's a renaissance of many companies and many actors looking at it. One of the things we're doing is trying to accelerate and incubate that technology and allow those actors to be able to bring that to Cardano quickly within the next 12, 24 months. So that's the last pillar of mass adoption, is making Cardano the best place to drop to millions of people. Like we're using Hydra for the Glacier drop for Midnight. That's where that 37 million people are. And it's very cheap for us to do that. In fact, one of the few blockchains that can do this. But also we're going to look at Hydra for payments, Hydra for games, Hydra for DeFi. So we're really excited about where that's going to go. And that's a great complementary technology that's going to bring an enormous amount of use and utility to our ecosystem.
他にもですね、このハイドラーがどういうふうに使われてくるのかというところで、いろんな期待というのが今後数年の中にあるんですけれども、特に、今、いろんなその実験が行われている中で、ロールアップを使った、ゲームであったりとか、その支払いへの応用というのに期待をしています。一つの憶測ではあるんですけれども、X.com、イーロン・マスクのプラットフォームですね、が、クリプトを使ったその、ウォレットの導入というのはもう昔から言われているんですけれども、それを今すぐにチップを、合わせたそのツイートとか、そういったその使い方をしてくるんじゃないかなというふうに予想しています。で、彼らのユーザーが約5億人ぐらいいるので、こういったことの応用に、ハイドラがすごく役立つんじゃないかなというふうに期待してたりとか、その支払いとか、ディファイとか、ゲームという部分で、他のブロックチェーンであったとしても、そのカルダノのこのハイドラを使ったということが、起こってほしいなというふうに望んでいます。で、こういったことが特にすぐにそういったアクセスを生み出すのが、そのミッドナイトがさっき言っていたようなその3700万人のユーザーとかへのアクセス、これを全部できるのはカルダノだけじゃないかなと思っています。
So I'll close with politics, our favorite topic. So as many of you know, we've been having some fun in the United States of America with Trump and the White House and the Strategic Crypto Reserve, and I guess the U.S. government is now holding ADA. So maybe they'll become a D rep. That'll be interesting. Congratulations. But it's been a bit crazy. So we've done our best to try to navigate those waters. The United States is a government made of three branches: the legislative, the judicial, and the executive. And there are checks and balances in our Constitution. So if one of the branches is very excited about something, it typically gets moderated by the other two branches, the courts and the judicial branch, and the lawmaking process and the legislative branch. We have always felt that where we can contribute the most and have the most depth has been in the lawmaking side. So we're working actively with many senators and congressmen, and we're going to be making some initiatives to begin advising them in a more formal capacity so that they can keep up with the pace that Trump has decided to indulge in the executive branch, but also force into the conversation some understanding that American regulations have to work with the rest of the world. So another reason why I'm in Japan, in addition to talk to you, the SPOs and the DREPs, is also talk to the Japanese government and get a better sense of where Japan wants to go. People tend to forget that Japan is one of the largest, most powerful, and most dynamic economies in the world, and it would be unwise for the United States to make crypto regulation and ignore Japan's influence, as well as the influence of the Middle East and Europe's MiCA. So the legislative process needs to be viewed through a global lens, which means global regulators have to be consulted to discuss how these markets are going to work. Because I would like for Japanese ADA holders to be treated the same way as American ADA holders, be treated the same way as European ADA holders, and treated the same way as ADA holders in Abu Dhabi and Argentina and other places. Otherwise, it'll become very difficult for cryptocurrencies to work because these are global systems at the end of the day. And they run 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So Japan has earned a seat at the table by its economy, its scale, and its size. And so that's another reason why I'm here, is to make sure that I'll do everything in my power to include Japan in that conversation so that they don't get left out of executive workshops at the White House and things like that. They need to be brought into the conversation.
で、最後にですね、ちょっと政治の話をしたいと思います。皆さんご存知の通り、アメリカではね、政治はそのホットトピックであり、今、トランプの、就任に際して、いろんなそのカオスなことが起こっているんですけれども、クリプトリザーブの設置であったりとか、こういった中でアメリカ政府がそのエイダを保有することに正式になりました、そういうふうに発表があったんで、願わくば DREP にも、なってほしいというふうに考えているんですけれども、どこまで皆さんがそのアメリカの政治のことをご存知かちょっとわからないんですけども、アメリカではその三権分立というのをその謳っている中で、どうしてもその、大統領府が強く何かをこう、施行しようとしたとしても、国会がそれにある程度こうブレーキをかけたりとか、後から補足的にそこに法律を作ったりとかっていう流れがあるんですけれども、チャールズとしてはより、その、法整備の部分で、いろんな議員であったりとかと、議論しながら長期的な、そのトランプが、押せと、いけいけと作っていってるそのポリシーに、後からちゃんとこう、実用的導入されるようなその法整備の部分で、よりオフィシャルな形でアドバイザーなのか、そういった形でこう入っていけるようにというふうに努力しています。で、そういった中でも、やはりその日本のユーザーの方々、日本のそのエイダ保有者っていうのも、すごく重要なパートを担っていると思っていますし、じゃあエイダ保有者の中で、この国の人たちはこういう権利が得られてるけど、この国の人たちはそういう権利が得られていないっていう、そういう格差みたいなことも起こってほしくないです。それと、やっぱり忘れてはならないのが、その日本の経済っていうのはかなり大きな経済圏ですし、そのクリプトの保有者もたくさんいるので、ぜひその DREP の方々の協力を得つつ、チャールズとしてもその活発に、日本のその規制団体であったりとかとのそのコミュニケーションっていうのを密に取っていきたいです。やっぱりそのエイダ保有者、そのヨーロッパの人たち、中東の人たち、日本の人たち、アメリカの人たち、みんながその同じような権利を持って、エイダ保有者として、いろんなその活動に従事できるように、自分でも全力を尽くしていきたいと思っています。
すごい。OK、お疲れ様。
お疲れ様です。ありがとうございます。
Thank you.
So actually, there are some questions
Sure.
Regarding the.
難しい。
そこ、
If we're still recording, why don't you ask the question in Japanese and he can translate?
はい、まず一つ目の、質問なんですけども、経済規模はテーブルに着席する権利を得るための基準ですか？
Would you say that the scale of the economy is what determines kind of who gets a seat at that table of discussions of それはごめんなさい、どのテーブルでしょうか？それだけが来たんですね。はい。Yeah, I'm not exactly sure if the question was intended to be asking like at the table of like Trump's administration or like general like each local regulatory discussion.
Yeah.
I'm not exactly sure which.
So I understand the question. So the global economy, your seat at the table has historically been connected to the strength of your GDP and the strength of your military. And that's how the legacy world works. And what we're trying to do in the crypto world is build inclusive systems. So even if you have a smaller GDP and a smaller military, you have an equivalent seat at the global table for rulemaking. And our hope is that we can live in a world where the small have an equal say. So crypto is the first example where we think we can achieve that. And from my conversations with U.S. regulators and U.S. lawmakers, they see value in one interlocking global system. And they're trying really hard to figure out how to build such a system. And the challenge is that China also sees value in that. And so they're working very hard with the digital yuan, Belt and Road, and social credit to create a parallel system. So the U.S. system has to be more competitive than that effort. And China has some built-in advantages because of their debt diplomacy. But the U.S. Does feel that it has some advantages because of it owning the stablecoin market with Tether and Circle. So there's a lot of very complicated geopolitics going on here, but the only way for the U.S. to win is through great partners. And Japan has a seat at the table, the European Union has a seat at the table, and the Middle East obviously has a seat at the table. And working together, I think we can figure out an international framework that works for everybody.
まあ今までのその傾向としては、ほとんどの場合、やっぱり GDP とその軍隊の、まあ、どちらかとか、どちらも合わせたその影響力の大きさみたいなことで、ほとんどその議論のテーブルにつけるかということが判断されてきたと思うんですけれども、まあ特にこのクリプトの業界というのは、必ずしもそういったことに縛られない、いろんなその良さとかを生かしたその参入が認められるような可能性というのがあると思います。で、まあ、チャールズ自身がアメリカの規制監督機関とかとコミュニケーションを取っている中で言うと、やっぱりじゃあそういう、いっぺんにみんなの意見をまとめられるような場が存在する、何かその接続する、場所みたいなものがあると、すごく便利だみたいなことに、アメリカの規制団体は非常に興味があると思います。やっぱり中国が今現状、一路一体政策とか、まあ、デジタル元を使った、まあ、そういったその、議論の場、そういったみんなをつなげる要素みたいなものが、まあ、存在しているので、これと競合になっているというか、これに勝るようなより優れたシステムをみんな求めているというのは間違いない事実だと思います。
ありがとうございます。じゃあ、ラストクエスチョン。
はい。
はい。アフリカの経済規模は小さく、枝を持っている人や D レップもまだまだ小さいです。そこでカルダノの採用にはまた大きな可能性を秘めています。D レップが現在重視されている中、アフリカはカルダノのガバナンスにどのように効果的に貢献できるでしょうか。
So, Africa's economic influence, and also when you look at like the amount of ADA holders that there are, or maybe the number of DREPs, the African influence currently seems small, but also the potential sort of influence could be big, or the potential sort of contribution could be really big.
Yeah.
In what ways do you think that could happen? What are the sort of early steps of that happening from the African perspective?
I think the two big pillars of the Africa strategy are the embracing of microfinance in Africa. And we've been doing that with John O'Connor and the RealFi company in Kenya. We tried with Ethiopia, but a war broke out and it was very, very difficult to make meaningful progress there. Also, the government reneged on its promises of removing capital controls and embracing crypto. So they kind of wasted time for a lot of people involved. But Kenya is a great market, as is Uganda, and Nigeria is a surprisingly good market, just a bit too big for us at the moment, although we'll enter in soon. But microfinance is one big pillar, and we've already submitted $5 million worth of loans through the RealFi platform, and the goal is to bring that to Cardano and integrate it fully within the next 2 years to 3 years. And we'll be using stablecoins on Cardano, identities on Cardano, and Cardano wallets. So that'll create a circular economy that will help our stablecoins, but also create yield that people can access. So that'll be a great point for adoption. The second is real world assets, and real world assets, Africa desperately needs this because China has been deeply predatory with their Africa policy. So they go buy up all the mines and they go buy up all the real estate and they do a lot of stuff. And that debt diplomacy gives them an enormous amount of economic control and property rights erode. So many African nations have reached out and said, is there a path where we can get our raw materials onto the Cardano blockchain or a blockchain so that we can protect them from China? And you see ventures in the Cardano ecosystem like Dan Friedman's venture, Palmyra, where he's talking a lot about commodities and real world assets. And I think Africa is going to be a phenomenal market for that. And what's nice is they can get kind of the three things they need. They can get liquidity, they can get investment, and they can get auditability and provenance. So this allows them to participate in a global market in a fair way without having to go through a proxy like China. So Cardano as a force for good can do that. And we have a great local community there, a lot of good D-reps. We saw that with the Kenyan convention for the Constitutional Convention. A lot of wonderful people showed up and they're very invested and involved. So you have what you need, which is young, passionate leaders who want to do this. They just need some capital. So you D-reps, you have to make a decision of what jurisdictions do you want to grow within. Do you want to grow within legacy jurisdictions like Japan, Europe, and North America? Or do you want to also grow in emerging markets as well? For example, like Vietnam and Southeast Asia, Africa, or South America and the LATAM markets. And what is the ratio of these types of things? We can make recommendations, but ultimately the D-reps have to decide a strategy of where do they think the best bang for our buck is going to be. The treasury is quite large, but we still have relatively finite resources, so we can't exploit every jurisdiction. We can't go into every place. So we have to figure out that ratio. I've always argued that Africa is a strong place. Unfortunately, it's one of the slowest markets to do things. And whereas other places like Vietnam, for example, they move much, much faster, and we have better connections in some respects there.
アフリカですね、今どういうふうにこれからの、カルダノとか暗号通貨、コミュニティの拡大に関わるのか、2つの部分があると思います。1つは、マイクロペイメントの部分ですね。で、この部分は、ケニアにあるリアルファイ、ジョン・コナーがスタートしたプロジェクトなんですけれども、もともとエチオピアでスタートしたプロジェクトなんですけど、ちょっと戦争が起こってしまったりとか、特定の暗号通貨の規制が変わると約束していたのが変わらなかったりとかっていうことで、ちょっとブレーキがかかってしまったものの、今、ケニアで実動しています。すでにもう5ミリオンぐらいのローンを出していたりするプロジェクトがもう始まっていますし、これ以外にもアフリカで非常に大きなポテンシャルがあると思っています。ナイジェリアも大きな国なので、ちょっと今はまだ取り組んではいないものの、間もなくナイジェリアでも活動する予定ですし、ウガンダとか、非常に今規制環境とかから注目している地域も他にもあります。で、こういったことが、ステーブルトークンの導入と、ウォレットが普及することによって、マイクロペイメントとか、マイクロファイナンスのエコシステムの拡張みたいなことはどんどん連鎖していくのかなと思います。それ以外にも、やっぱりRWA の世界、リアルワールドアセットの世界線で見ても、今アフリカが多く、成長にも関わっていたけれども悩んでいる部分として中国の、から抱える負債とかいろんな資源にアクセスするために、中国の関係みたいなものがあったり、独自の、経済圏でうまくそれができていないみたいな部分があると思うんですけれども、鉱山の開発とか、負債の、購入みたいなことをしてきたことに対してリアルワールドアセットという形でトークンを使うことによって、特に体のものを使ってもらえれば、まず、一つにはリクイディティが得られるし、二つには投資をうまく得られる可能性もあるし、世界的な市場にそれを見せていく中で、本当に透明性のある、なんていうんですか、監査みたいなことにも非常に役立つということがあるので、アフリカにおいて DREP の存在もそうですし、コミュニティっていうのはケニアで行われたコンベンションでも非常に、若いいろんな人たちのエネルギーを感じられたので、 あとは、そこにどういうそのお金の後押しが来るのかというポイントになってきます。で、これからその D レップの皆さんは、これもちょっと考える必要があると思います。トレジャリーの資金というのは今、潤沢にあるんですけれども、無限ではありません。やっぱり限りがあります。で、その中で、その資金を日本とか、そういったその先進国にどの程度当てていくのか、より、そのベトナムとか、新興市場ですね、に当てていくのか、それともアフリカに当てていくのか、このあたりが、皆さん、100ゼロではないんですけれども、どのくらいの割合で労力を当てていくのかっていうことを考えていく必要があると思います。アフリカが一番ポテンシャルはあるとはずっと前から言っているものの、じゃあ、速度が遅いのもどうしてもアフリカです。ベトナムなんかは非常に早くお金から何か効果が得られる可能性もあると思います。こういったことをみんなで考えていく必要はあるのは事実ですね。
Yeah, a final point. This is why I think we have a huge competitive advantage over Solana, Ethereum, and Bitcoin and other ecosystems, is that success in this space is going to be something that occurs in years to decades, and it's going to come as a result to deep thinking and wisdom about what markets to enter and what applications to emphasize. And having such a strong Japanese community where Japan has a long legacy of very long bets. Like if you look at the Shinkansen, for example, you look how long you've been working on it. And this is a country that's been literally built as a result of generational thinking. So generational thinking is also going to be required for the growth and roadmap of Cardano. So given that we have such a high proportion of ADA in Japan and a lot of DREPs in Japan, as they think about the strategy, I would encourage them to think about 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, and say, well, okay, where do we want to have centers of gravity? Where do we want to have strength and power from? And Japan has been a country that has consistently done that. It's many thousands of years of history. So I'd encourage you to think deeply about this, and we'll be here every step of the way. We'll be working with you every step of the way. We have a lot of recommendations. We have a lot of relationships. We have to think about, for example, how to build an incubation acceleration function. We have partnerships with Outlier Ventures and easily construct them with Techstars and 500 startups. And we have some advice on how to pursue such a program, and whether you want to grow it out of Catalyst or if you want to do it separate of Catalyst. So really, it's a dialogue at this point. It's not a mandate of a leader saying do A or do B. It's more of giving you options and saying let's all together come together and have a conversation about these options, and then ultimately we have to make some decisions. And every year we'll look at the results of those decisions and we'll change accordingly, knowing that it'll take several years to decades for us to fully realize the dream.
ソラナ、イーサー、ビットコイン、じゃあ誰がどういうふうにその成功するのかみたいなことを考えたときに、じゃあその成功っていうのは大体のものがですね、その本当に10年とかかけて達成されるようなその目標のことを成功だと我々は多分定義すると思います。で、どの市場でどういったそのプレイをしていくのか、で、それが、長期的にどういう果実をもたらすのかみたいなことを本当に長くみんなでゆっくり考えていく必要があると思います。日本がすごいその分かりやすい例というか、例えばじゃあその新幹線のプロジェクトを見たときには、あれは本当にその3年とか5年で達成されたことではなくて、本当に何十年とみんなが取り組んできた成果が本当にその世界でベストな移動手段みたいなことの確立につながったと思います。なんで D レップの方々も本当にその日本が得意としてきた世代シンキングっていうか言い方をしたんですけど、その本当に今の世代もそうですけれども、次の世代で本当に有用なものを今から作り始めるにはどうしたらいいんだろうみたいな、そういうその思考パターンに頑張って持っていきたいというふうに考えています。で、その中で当然 IO は、その一歩一歩最初の段階から本当にその10年先みたいなところまで一緒に協力してやっていきたいなというふうに考えていますし、その会話をその有意義なものにするためのその提案みたいなこともぜひしていきたいと考えています。例えば一つで言うと、インキュベーションとかアクセラレーションをどういうふうにやっていくのか、例えば500スタートアップとやるのか、テックスターズとやるのか、こういったところですよね。これをカタリストからやっていくのか、カタリストは全く別でやっていくのか。
Outlier Ventures too, you missed that.
Outlier Ventures? Yeah, I did that. アウトライヤーベンチャーズというのも一つパートナーとしてありますね。バレちゃいましたね、僕の、ミスが。はい。で、こういったところを、本当にだからその A をやるのか B をやるのか、これをやってくださいという話ではなくて、全体で、うまくこの競技を本当に長い時間をかけてやっていって、A の方がいいのか B の方がいいのかっていうことをみんなで考えていきたいというふうに楽しみにしています。
Yeah. And one last thing to mention, That's my third one last thing. It's hard for me. I have spent 10 years talking, and now I have to spend the next 10 years listening. So that's going to be a big transition and a change and a difference. But I'm actually quite excited because we've built an incredible community. We got Adam Dean here, we got Sam here, we got Kyle here, we got Adam Rush here, we got Oscar, and many other people in between. And they've been loyally in this ecosystem, and they have a lot of great ideas and thoughts. So we all have to learn how to listen well. And the great collective intelligence that we've assembled is our greatest USP. When people say, why will Cardano succeed? It's because we have all the minds. We have all the people. And the challenge is we just have to learn how to harness those minds. We can always make the protocol faster. We can always add more features to the protocol. We can always have more competitive applications. And it'll take quite a bit of time to figure out what needs to be done. But to figure out what needs to be done, that comes from your brain. And if you have a big collective mind, which is what Voltaire has given us, we have the best brain, and thus we'll have the best strategy, and thus we'll win. So do realize that Voltaire is our biggest competitive advantage, and it's why we did Voltaire before Basho. You know, a lot of people said we should have just focused on scalability or something, but that would have meant that we were not able to benefit from all of you. So I'm here to listen, and I'm here to learn from what you guys have. And a lot of people came to Japan to listen and learn as well. We want to make sure that you're integrated well in and you're part of this ecosystem as you help start it. And having said that, thank you much.
はい、最後にですね、最後にさっきから言ってるんで、ちょっと3つ目の最後になっちゃうんですけど、僕は、チャールズはその10年間話し続けてきました。なんで、これからの10年っていうのは、本当にその耳を貸すというか、今よく聞くということの10年になってくるかなと思います。これ自体も非常に面白いシップになるかなと思うんですけども。なるんでしょう。で今日一緒に来てくれている仲間もいろんな人もいるんですけれども、本当に重要なポイントとしては、じゃあ簡単に、ブロックチェーンのそのスペックを上げようとしたら、それ自体はそこまで難しくない、一つ一つのタスクで言うと難しくないことも多いんですけれども、じゃあ何をどのタイミングで何をどういうふうに優先して、何と連携して進めていくのか、この部分が非常に難しくて、これを可能にするのがボルテアでした。なので、このボルテアの導入を優先しましたし、そのおかげで、今、こうやって本当に皆さんの意見とか考えを聞くことができるブロックチェーンになりました。なので、これをぜひ活かして、みんなで次の、何をっていうのを決めていきましょう。はい、ありがとうございます。
We can get some pictures if you guys want, and then I gotta go get some lunch with the Virgo guy.
You're also going to see him. I think everyone here is.
Okay. Oh, okay. Yes, if you only get a picture here or the event, doesn't matter to me. There's only a few people here, so. Yeah. What do you tell what do we are? It's hard.
Yeah, okay.
Hey, buddy.
It's our secret weapon. It's like you're here coming to Knoxville or something. The same Knoxville, okay? It's a Knoxville.
Oh, be in Japanese.
I wonder why. All right. You know, surprise Charles.
皆さん、大阪から来ていただきまして、ありがとうございます。
届いたところです。
ありがとうございます。
皆さんお願いします。
トピック。
じゃあそうしましたら、一旦、次の再開は11時15分頃から、またオンライン接続したいと思います。一旦、画面クローズと、音声ミュートさせていただきます。引き続き、この後はフリーディスカッションですね、Q&A を行っていきますので、もし質問あるという方いらっしゃいましたら、事前にチャット欄のところにも書いていただけたらと思います。では、引き続きどうぞよろしくお願いいたします。ありがとうございます。ありがとうございます。 All right, so thank you so much. So we are going to live from 11:15, Japan time. So please break 15 minutes. Thank you.
I'm a theoretical. Yeah, so, yeah, don't.
Hey everybody, what's up, dudes? Hey Cameron, good to see you. Joe, I noticed you're George. What's up, Cam?
So, how you doing, guys?
We're hanging out, man. Good. So we're doing a little bit of an open chat here. There we go. Okay. Sorry for the echo. So we're doing a little bit of just an open chat in the room here while we're waiting for lunchtime. And then after lunch, Yuta-san and Sarah-san will join us, and we'll get into a bit more of the budget talk and the roadmap development talk. But if you guys have questions in the meantime, feel free to drop them in the chat. And we're here hanging out, happy to answer any questions you have. But our last minute schedule, I found about this trip last week, and I asked Taichi-san to schedule this meeting for the community to try to, our goal is to come here and try to listen and hear what the community wants from Cardano, not what we want to deliver to the community. So the intent is really to listen, like Charles said. And one of the key things that we heard yesterday was that a lot of the Japanese community, they are here because of that initial vision that Charles shared with the community 5-7 years ago, whatever it's been now. And so really the big thing was, let's keep doing that. Let's keep banking the unbanked and helping people in underprivileged areas.
Right. Let's create real utility and not just pump our backs. Thanks.
Right.
Yes. A huge point of yesterday's conversations.
Yeah. So and so we'll get into more of the new process for how Intersect is going to help guide the budget process and how we will help develop the roadmap collaboratively with the community in about 1 p.m. 1300 Japan time here. So in the meantime, if you want to hang out, like I said, add questions to the chat. Otherwise, we're going to go back to talking in the room here with everybody that's in attendance. And thank you all very much for tuning in.
はい、ありがとうございます。そうしましたら、今の時間は1時までは、フリーのタイムとなっております。こちらオフライン会場ですね。ですので、この時間を活用して、もしこちらにも今、SPO の方もいらっしゃいますし、DREP の方も、参加していただいてます。ですので、私、こちらのチャットの方をいつも見てますので、ご質問いただきましたら、そうそうたるメンバーがこちらの会場お越しいただいてます。ですので、適宜に、確認を取って、一緒にコミュニケーションを取ることも可能ですので、もし画面オンできるよって方いらっしゃいましたら、オンにしていただいても構いませんし、チャット欄の方でも質問を受け付けてますので、どうぞよろしくお願いいたします。で、また、1時からですね、カルダのロードマップ、カルダのバジェット2025の、アジェンダに沿ってワークショップも行いますので、どうぞ引き続きよろしくお願いします。ぜひコメント欄の方にご質問等あれば、どんどん書き込んでいただければと思います。ありがとうございます。
Thank you.
So is someone live?
Yeah, we're gonna.
Questions come up?
Yeah. Thank you. Get it.
今 Q&A がある方いらっしゃったら、ここで対応するってことで。ちょっとご飯買ってくるかな。わかりました。はい。牛丼でいい？
牛丼か、カツカレーか。
Good, thank you.
So yeah, the question is, I'm really interested in the Cardano Hubs program and some of the things that we can do with that to augment the budget process. I would like to hear about the work going on to help with that implementation. So I think the Hubs program that Intersect started last year is the intent is to continue it right now. It's one of our budget line items that we have, but we have to define whether they're Cardano hubs or Intersect hubs. So I think the move is to move them into Cardano hubs where they're much more focused on bringing people into the community. Yeah, we have Mr. Rush here as well that can join us.
Hello, everyone. Adam Rush. I'm on the board of directors for Intersect. So one of the things that Intersect is looking at is how to maximize the Intersect Hubs program. So we've been discussing, instead of having just a small number of hubs in each large region and having them try to represent the entire region, can we do many different hubs for different regions, different areas? Can we have people sort of define, like, we are a group that's interested in doing Cardano programming, bring people together and have it more customized to what their community is. So these are things that are still in exploration. We are still defining what it's going to be, but there's definitely an interest in turning it into something that is more tailored to local Cardano organizations, letting them come with their ideas to tell us how they would like to run their programming and where they would need support, and having it be more agile so that it will be in partnership with the people on the ground already running these organizations.
Yeah, thank you for the question, Cam.
Right on. Yeah, I was just going to say, I was building something almost exactly what you're talking about. I just read through the Cardano Hubs implementation page that I think it was Jose Velasquez posted that up on Twitter. And I started reading through it. I was like, oh, well, we were starting something very similar to that. And just from my perspective, I'm involved with the groundwater remediation industry. And so I've several clients that are interested in blockchain. And so I was like, okay, how can we use the budget to create some sort of a rewards pool that could help incentivize these people to get involved so that they can, first become, holders of Cardano. And then once they start to understand the process of how the blockchain works, how they can integrate and find efficiencies in their business using it. And then they can start building their own dApps or hire somebody to create something that would create those efficiencies for them. And so I was like, okay, I want to create this, this hub that would accomplish these things, get the right people talking to the right people, get people involved in Cardano, holding ADA so that they will have the ability to perform transactions in the future. So at this point, yeah, I was just going to find out. I saw that you guys were putting up a certain amount of ADA for the hubs, just to kind of get started, and then using different KPIs to try to say, okay, what would you like to do? Here's some money. What I was going to suggest is say, here's a rewards pool, and if you accomplish these things, this is what you will receive. And from my perspective in industry, and a lot of the people that I've talked to, they're like, if we know what we will receive for getting this number of people to hold ADA or this number of transactions to be performed, then they can go ahead and start crafting their own tools. I was just going to kind of throw that out there.
And then
yeah. Okay, you want to say it or something?
No, go ahead.
I mean, I know there's probably a lot of options out there, and there is a working group, I believe, that is working on this and exploring the ideas. So we would definitely want to let them work through this and come up with a plan. And so definitely coordinate with them. I think we can drop in the chat. I'll find out who would be the best contact for that that we can drop in the chat. But yeah, I'll try to find that out. If anyone knows, you can drop it in the chat.
Absolutely.
Awesome.
And I think Oh, yeah. Good. All right. Yeah. And I think Mercy had a hand up as well. If you want to jump in with your comments or question, Mercy.
Absolutely. Thanks, Adam, and thanks, well, Adam and Adam, for coming to speak to us. Yes, so there is currently a reorganization of the, originally it was intersect hubs. Obviously, there's been a lot of pushback regarding calling them intersect hubs. So that is why the reorganization is happening. That work is being led primarily by Tiago. Utah is in the working group as well as myself. Cameron, I'm happy to link you up. Was it Cameron that was speaking? Yes. Yeah. So I'm happy to link you up. I can drop my email in the chat. But yes, absolutely. I think that in terms of everything that's happening, the focus on DREPs and so on, we do need a strong local presence. And we agree that the hubs will be the way forward. So thank you for bringing that agenda to the table. Thanks.
Oh, thank you, Mercy, for speaking up.
Yeah, and so one of the things that we might touch on a little bit later in the session, the goal that I really had, that I had laid out a few months ago, that I've pitched to Intersect, and we're here in Japan trying to pilot it with Sam and Kyle from the product committee, is how do we set a roadmap and a product vision for Cardano together? And I think the best way to do that is with small group in-person meetings where we can get together and talk about what the actual problems are that are affecting the Japanese community versus our communities in America, or the communities in Africa versus the communities in Canada, because a little bit too often we get trapped in our own bubble of impression and bias over our own region. And it's important that we figure out ways to elevate every community from every corner of the globe, and figure out how can Cardano work better for them and solve problems for them in their local region. It's not enough anymore to just have a US or a Western European centric mandate of here's a tool that we're going to give to you and solve a problem that you didn't even know you had. We need to actually figure out what those problems are first and then work to develop those solutions. So to that end, we talked about how do we as a community identify things like diminishing returns? Can we just throw more money at every problem and get it done faster? And a lot of good things like that came up during yesterday's conversation. And what I'm really hoping comes out of this week worth of meetings here in Japan is that we build a framework that can be open source and copy and pasted around the world and create a continuous flywheel effect of community feedback from local areas. So even if you don't have a formal hub acknowledgement from Intersect or Cardano in general from the budget, get together at a pub or at a coffee shop or in your house and just talk to people about how Cardano and blockchain can improve life for people in your specific region. I know I kind of bought into the Charles vision back in 2019, but also primarily because I was tired of all of our U.S. elections being a giant cluster of, and so I came in thinking, hey, how do we use blockchain for voting and elections to reduce voter fraud? But I'm sure a lot of other people came for their own reasons, and we all had our own path that we've walked to get to where we are today. So that's really the big intent that we're aiming for. So, but yeah, and so I see Joe says they didn't apply for an Intersect Oceania hub because they were already running a Cardano hub in, I believe she's down in New Zealand. So yeah, there's definitely some overlapping efforts that we've done over the years.
Yeah, and that's a Cardano Foundation thing, right? And it's definitely something where we need to have all of our institutions coordinating to make sure, like, not that we need one to take it over. We absolutely don't want like one organization taking over everything. What we want to do is just coordinate everyone, right? So we all know what everyone is doing and say, hey,
He said, no,
oh
totally
no,
volunteer.
nothing to do with CF. Okay, well then never mind. I know that CF has their like Cardano ambassadors though, for instance, right? So we definitely don't want to take away from that. We don't want to take away from what anyone else is doing. We don't want to take away from anyone else who has an independent Cardano hub, right? We want to just provide opportunities for networking. Yeah.
もしご質問ありましたら、可能な限り私通訳しますので、日本語でもチャット欄にコメントいただけたらと思います。
Like no more questions or comments for the time being. So.
So, might be the Japanese member just on the way.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's why. So, just
yeah, so we have Joe and Cameron just kind of chatting in the chat about the Cardano Hubs program, but yeah.
And Mercy, I think, is catching them.
Yeah, but yeah, I mean, shout out to everybody that's been part of the Cardano community over the years that is out here working and volunteering their time to build their local communities. That is huge, and definitely respect all the community builders out there, whether or not they have budget.
大輔さん、ありがとうございます。すでに何が起こっているか分かりません。ありがとうございます。今の状況としましては、1時まで Q&A、質問タイムになっております。ですので、ご自由に質問していただければ、こちらにアダム・ディーンさんもいらっしゃいますし、アダム・ラッシュさんもいらっしゃいますし、私、横山もいますので、日本語でお答えすることも可能な範囲でできればと思いますので、よろしくお願いいたします。
It's genuinely very good at like translating.
Oh, I see George has a hand up. Let us mute, and then we'll turn up our speaker here so we can hear you, George.
太一さんにちょっと質問なんですけど、その日本のクジラたち、そのエーダーを持っているクジラたち結構いますじゃないですか。でその人たちって結構顔出したくない人が多いじゃないですか。やっぱこういうカルダノのセミナーとかに来ないじゃないですか。それをなんか僕今実際英語をこういうクジラたちを4人ぐらいに教えてて、でその裏のクジラたちのコミュニティたちがなんかコミュニティっていうか。とりあえず持っといて、またドバイとかに飛んだりして、そうですね、その理覚できるようにしてる人もいるし、やっぱまだ日本にいる人たちもいるけど、やっぱこの人たちはやっぱこうやって話し合いにしに来ない人たちが多いので、どうやってこの人たちも一緒に含めていけるのかっていう質問ですね。
ありがとうございます。So one of the committee member asked to us for as being no Japan has a poem a lot, but there doesn't show to face to face. But this time, so he really think about this is important time because there has a like area. The mean is which mean is there has a power. Right? That's why. So he would like to contact the poet and then wanna be communicate. The question is how can be communicate the poet who don't want to show. はい。
英語で僕行きますよ。英語で話します。
ありがとうございます。ありがとうございます。
はい。So I wanted to ask you guys, so there's a big whale community. There's a big whale community in Japan, and there's a lot of.
One second.
ちょっとごめんなさい。
Is it okay? All right. So there's a big whale community in Japan, and so a lot of them don't like to show their face because they don't want to be taking pictures or anything like that. And I actually teach a couple of these whales English, and I told them about the event, and none of them want to come out and support, but they actually got me into crypto. They got me into Cardano. And I just wanted to know how we could get this other community that's, they're like whales, but they're like talking on the outside. There's like a group of them. There's like a group of them. I wanted to see how we could kind of get them into the ecosystem also.
Yeah, so I think something that's really important is that we shouldn't put so much importance on whether you're a whale or a shrimp or a krill or a plankton or anything in between, because we're all members of the Cardano community, right? And that's really what we tried to enshrine in the Cardano Constitution that we've just ratified, is that everybody, whether you have billions because you're like a Binance or you have one Lovelace in your wallet, is a member of this community, and they should be welcomed and brought in to the community. So I would encourage them, if they're interested, just go up and say you're a casual Cardano holder that is interested in participating and joining the community. But definitely, don't feel a need to expose how much ADA you may or may not have, because that's just good OPSEC, right?
And what I will say is that, part of being a cryptocurrency is that we are built on pseudonymity, right? You have your address, your Cardano address is your pseudonym, that is your identity. And you get to decide whether your face is associated with that address or not. But what's nice about Cardano is we have two pillars for Cardano. One is proof of stake. The security of Cardano is based on the people who have ADA are protecting the network by using the ADA to secure it through stake pool operators and through voting with DREPs. And the second is meritocracy. When somebody comes into the community with a good idea, the people who hear that idea can delegate their stake to them and say, you have a good idea, so I'm going to support you with my ADA. And so those are the two pillars of Cardano, proof of stake and meritocracy. And so I think that just sort of coming out and saying, I have some ideas. I don't have to tell you how much ADA I have. I don't have to tell you my address. Maybe I have a DREP ID. I'm just going to tell you my DREP ID. Or maybe I don't want to directly participate in, in like my face being in the conversation, but I'm going to listen to the ideas, and then I will delegate to the person who has the best ideas. That's how we can make sure that everybody gets included as part of our network.
Bear with us just a moment, because Taichi-san is working through some of these questions in the chat for us.
Yeah. There's a whole bunch of stuff like that, separate, fragmented, so.
S マンさん、ありがとうございます。プールオペレーターをしています、S マンと言います。このような場でありがとうございます。質問に対して私の推測はコミュニティに参加していないクジラたちが思うことは、一つはセキュリティを気にしている。あとは話が難しいかと、単純に投資している方もいると思います。 ガバナンスの参加に対するモチベーションを上げていくのかが問題ですね。ということで、ありがとうございます。エスマンさん、ありがとうございます。そうですね。そう、yeah, most people just, interesting about invest, right? But the members say how to join that, governance is very.
So I think it's perfectly fine. It takes all types of people to make a world, and so it's perfectly okay if your only reason for being in crypto is to invest and hope that the number goes up. So as Nguyen says, the problem is how to raise motivation for participation in governance. And so I think really helping people understand that now they do actually have a voice and control over the system, right? This isn't just made up. Your voice can matter if you want it to. So letting them know that they have this way to participate and be part of the governance process if they want. It's better to have a small group of very passionate people participating in governance because they want to, versus wanting everybody to participate just because. We will lead to better outcomes, I think, if we just encourage people to participate because they want to, out of their own choice.
Yeah, I agree. I'm very skeptical of forced participation. And if you force someone to participate, they may make choices that are unwise because they just choose randomly. But hopefully, if we prove that this is a good system, if we prove that people can come to participate, and we have more and more people who volunteer to serve as D-reps and come forward and show what their motivations are and talk about their ideas, then those people who are on the sidelines may eventually find someone who speaks to them. And so you never know when someone maybe it'll take them a year before they say, I'm finally ready to look into this. I'm finally ready to find someone who agrees with me for my philosophy. And so we just sometimes might need to be ready for them to go at their pace.
Well, that's actually a really good point I'd like to touch on before Mercy, I see your hand up, is it kind of goes back to what George was asking, right? Like there's these people that want to remain anonymous, but maybe they actually are interested in participating, but they want to maintain their anonymity to some degree. So one of the nice things about Cardano's governance system is that we have it's a representative democracy. So George, you or anybody else could actually serve as the D-rep for those people, right? You could be the person that's willing to stand up and represent their interests publicly, to allow them to kind of not have to expose themselves necessarily. And so real quick, Mercy, before we go to your hand, we have a comment from Taro, who runs the Ban C pool, that says, what do we want? What do you most want from the Japanese community? I think for me personally, what I want to know is, what does the Japanese community want from Cardano? How can I, in my roles as a CIP editor, on the technical steering committee, on the open source committee, how can I make Cardano better for you, Taro? And so, like, I'm not here to sell you anything or convince you to vote my way. I want you to tell me how I can do a better job for you and be a representative for you.
This one is, I think, the very.
Okay, so from Daisuke, we have, I am developing as an SPO, a D-rep, and other tools. I feel a sense of crisis about the fact that many delegations are being concentrated in specific pools in Japan, and that D-rep delegations are also being concentrated in specific people. Are you two aware of this fact? Yes, because it's been something that we've seen, unfortunately and fortunately, since the Shelley hard fork, with stake pools. I used to run the Buffy stake pool. Shout out BuffyBot. But the stake moved to other operators that were either better at social media. They had some sort of a better value prop to attract delegation. And while I think there might be a concern, right, I'm not super concerned right now with how concentrated the delegation may be. Decentralization to some point is a tool that helps us get to where we want to go, which is having a censorship-resistant blockchain that is immutable and safe. And so there's a point of diminishing returns where too much decentralization just for the sake of decentralization doesn't actually give us any sort of performance benefit. So we need decentralization to be an important point to the people in the community if we want to we don't want to arbitrarily force decentralization, because in that case, you end up with the same situation where stake is delegated to one person, but they just look like 5 people. They become a civil attack, essentially, right? And we've seen this with multi-pool operators and things like that in terms of stake pools, where we tried to arbitrarily implement a decentralization limit and say you can't go above this, otherwise you're cut off. So it's a little concerning, and I hear that concern, Daisuke, but I think the best thing that we can do is encourage people to decentralize to avoid any single point of failure in the ecosystem.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I remember when we discussed CIP 1694, one idea was, should we have an upper limit for the amount of delegation you can receive? And it was ultimately decided to not introduce that because of what we saw with the multi-pools, that people just had multi-pool number 1, multi-pool number 2, multi-pool number 3. And we figured that the D-reps would do the same thing. Someone would say, this is my D-rep number 1, D-rep number 2, D-rep number 3. I am optimistic that if this is going to work, if our Cardano governance experiment is going to work, it will, in the long run, decentralize. Yes, somebody might initially receive a lot of stake. They might become very popular. But then what happens if they take an unpopular position? That if there's a divisive issue in the community that many people disagree with, all of a sudden, that person might lose half their stake because people don't agree with them. And so those people will delegate to other people. That's our hope. I think that the consequences of arbitrarily trying to force people away from who they want to choose by introducing limits to their choices is worse than letting the system work itself out over the long run. But it's an experiment, and maybe we all go to 0.
ありがとうございます。すみません。映像は今見えてますでしょうか。もし見えてたら、なんかリアクションをいただけたらと思います。見えてる。すみません。ありがとうございます。ありがとうございます。ありがとうございます。挙手されていた方いらっしゃったかと思うんですが、発言できますでしょうか。
Exactly. They'll let you see like a catalog of its words. We really have a catalog. They can use it. Donate to us. We'll give you a catalog. We'll give you free stuff.
Yeah.
Wow, that is mysterious.
Joe with the hand up. So Joe, give us a second, and we're gonna mute up and turn our speaker up so we can hear you better here.
All good? Can you hear me? Perfect, thank you. Question for both of you. It's something I've raised before around the net change limit, and it's very relevant to the budget and to the DREP conversation. We currently don't have any simulators or anything that people that are less technical can use to move handles around, work on different layers of the ecosystem and see what might happen. It's something that, so one of the projects from our hub is working with the New Zealand government, another one is working with the Australian government. This is something, and we're working on things like rules of code, so that people that are drafting policy, just like we're doing, you know, as part of the CC and the DREPs and all the rest of it, they have some tools to see what might happen if we move this lever this way. At the moment, I don't see anything like that in any of the research buckets, any of the development buckets, anywhere. It's something that I'd like to propose. It's something that Mercy and Jose and I have thought about, put a proposal into Project Catalyst for, but it was something that would make the democracy so much easier, because people without a technical understanding and without being able to go through, I mean, Lawrence launched a whole list of data of the price of ADA over, or the amount of ADA that had been put into the Treasury over years, but he didn't release any of his simulations or any of his Monte Carlo analysis or anything. So it's meaningless to most people. Where does that sit in the budget today? Or should we just make our own proposal for something like that, a tool like that, that would help our democracy?
Okay, yeah, so that actually came up quite a bit during yesterday's session, was that this is all kind of fairly dynamic, and we're playing kind of probably about 2 years behind schedule from where we should be, all things considered. So right now we're in 2025, and we need to have a budget, but we also need to have a net change limit for that budget and have all these tools in place to help us to do all that. And we're kind of starting from nothing. So unfortunately, we find ourselves in a situation where we're lacking that tooling, like you described, Joe, that really would make it a lot easier to make well-informed decisions on things like, should we change the tax rate of how much money is going into the Treasury, right? Like, I don't know. How do we chart that and see what that looks like? So we definitely are missing a lot of the tooling that would make it easier for DREPs to make informed decisions. And I think, you know, it kind of stinks, but we're kind of in a situation where we just have to acknowledge that we're trying to make the best of a bad situation right now. So there's doing what we can and we need to do to make sure that the community keeps moving forward in 2025, and then taking proactive steps to make sure we do a better job in 2026, and start building out that tooling. And now, to that end, that's one of the interesting things that is being proposed about the change to Intersect's budget process, which is, as proposed right now, the intent would be that anybody that has a good idea, like, hey, I need some money to go and build this tool that we need for governance, can be submitted as is. So there's a little bit of concern that this is going to become like worse than even Catalyst was before, because there's going to be just a huge amount of too many different proposals to sort through and make good decisions on. But that was kind of the big takeaway about this pivot with Intersect recently, is that there was a little bit too much of a feeling that the Intersect committees were gatekeeping and or not hearing the community. So we wanted to, that's where we're trying to figure out this process. How do we listen to what the community wants us to build, and then make sure that we go and find somebody that can build that thing for us.
And this is something that we definitely can and will adjust as we go to find the right balance. If we've gone too far the other way, we'll come back to the middle and find what works best.
Supposedly is like that, like, you know, somebody will do something else.
Oh, it should be a high priority. I absolutely agree, Joe. But yeah, thank you very much for the question. Mercy, I see your hand up, so we're going to mute up and turn on our speaker, and so give us just a second.
Okay. Thanks again. And yes, absolutely, these simulations and things like that, very critical. We've had a lot of separate conversations about that, and I'm happy that it's back on the table. I do want to go back one step to what George was talking about in terms of the DREPs. Some of these whales, they don't want to be visible. And I want to talk about that within our bigger DREP strategy. And I think that Charles sort of alluded to that during the opening today in terms of, so first of all, one of the bigger issues is that currently, with the new budget process that has come out, there's going to be a lot more emphasis on DREPs, right? For somebody like, say, I don't know if George, you are a DREP, so you are holding all these ADA on behalf of these whales. As Adam Roche said, you are able to hear them and you are able to bring their thoughts to the table. What I am also beginning to think about, and I think that this has been a discussion, is how big of a responsibility or a burden that could potentially be, holding all that DREP and trying to make the best decisions for a lot of people, and especially some of our DREPs in Japan. What I want to ask is that what kind of discussion, Adam and Adam, what kind of discussion are we having regarding, first of all, like even the workload, right, of DREPs and some of these, the budgets that we are, the proposals that we are opening up, even some of these DREPs themselves, not the whales behind the DREPs, but the DREPs themselves. It's also upset for them to be too visible, in terms of coming up, coming out and doing that work, being visible, committing the time. That was why, for me, for instance, I thought that we could make something of the committees and make that work, maybe in the short term. So I just want to know what the discussion has been around that. And obviously, every time I open my mouth, I'm talking about Africa and the potential, right, of how much adoption could be there. And yet, when we look at the global, the Cardano global delegation, it's less than 1% out of, coming from Africa, which effectively means that when we are talking about even selecting proposals that could go on-chain, Africa might probably not be none of the African DREPs might be there. So anyway, is there anything like that that has come up? And what is the thinking around that?
Yeah, so there's definitely a big sense during yesterday's workshop that we are drastically increasing the amount of work that the DREPs are going to need to do. And maybe some of them did sign up for reviewing thousands of budgetary proposals, and that there definitely is going to be a need again, kind of going back to Joe's comment that we're going to need tooling to support them, and we don't have it right now. It just doesn't exist. So yeah, I definitely agree with both Joe's statement that we need to make this I would not even say high, but an urgent priority is building out the tooling. So kind of fun fact, I totally flipped on my perspective on how much budget we should be giving to DREP tooling after going through this process yesterday and realizing, wow, this is going to be a lot more work for the DREP. So we definitely need to reprioritize and increase budgetary spending for this tooling that we need to ensure that everybody that wants to participate has the tools in their toolbox to make good and informed decisions.
And that's not just about tooling, it's about process as well. We need to have the processes in place that helps to streamline the information flows so that we can organize this information, get it in a way for the D reps and all of the ADA holders to consider, and then give their opinions on, give rankings to reasonably critique them so that it can be made into the proper kind of budgets we need to vote on.
Okay, and so we have this comment in the chat from, is it Esman? S-M-A-N? Esman.
Yes.
So I still don't really understand intersect. And we're joined now by Sarah-san. Thank you for joining us.
Yep.
Is the funding that's required that Intersect is proposing, is the detailed content of this available to the public? If it is available to the public, can I see it on the Intersect website? So there was the budgets that Intersect had released just a few weeks ago that all the committees had been working really hard on. And the concern was that some of the spending was just kind of vague, to where it wasn't clear what we were going to be spending money to develop.
Just quickly, and so it's about the 2 million ADA of the Intersect organization itself.
Right, yeah.
Not the whole budget.
So
Intersect 2 million.
Yeah. So
ADA budget.
yeah. So as an organization, Intersect is trying to provide support to the Cardano community, so that we can have the committees that help with the product roadmap, have like civics committee that helped with the drafting of the Constitution, also do the work for like help develop the DREP tooling, and help organize hubs and things like that. I know that there is a report being worked on right now for in a comprehensive review of everything Intersect has done so far, which should be released soon. So I believe that the Intersect staff will have that for us soon for the community to review. So you'll be able to see if Intersect staff has been, what they've done with the money that they've been given so far by Emergo and IOG, who bootstrapped the organization. And then you'll be able to use that with, I know we're resubmitting all the budgets. You'll be able to use it with the comprehensive Intersect budget, where we'll have more detail into what Intersect wants to do for the coming year. But as an institution, Intersect has to hire people to work full time. So we have, people who are working on Intersect all the time so that they can support these committees, so that when we have people from the community coming in who have expertise in different areas, but they are only spending, a few hours a week, they can still have staff members who support them as well.
And so I think maybe something important to touch on, because we realized that Mr. Rush is on the board, so he has to kind of take a corporate stance to Intersect. And then there's just those of us that are members that we don't really understand yet either. So we are hopeful that we'll get some more transparency from Intersect in terms of how they're spending money. And then we can all, as a community, decide if we think that is too much, too little, or just right. And then adapt from there. But yeah, I think right now we need more information, and we don't have it yet, but we are expecting it in March. And
as a community, and as an organization, Intersect is here to serve the Cardano community. So what Cardano community wants is what Intersect will deliver. And if we have criticisms for us, we will hear them, and we will, live within our means.
はい、ちょっとだけ通訳させていただきます。まず、立場として、アダム・ラッシュさんは理事会の理事の一人です。で、アダム・ディーンさんはメンバーなので、ちょっと立場が違うんですけれども、アダム・ラッシュさんが、理事としての意見としては、インターセクト自体はカルダノを、発展させるためにコーディネーションする機関なので、カルダノのためにだったら何でもする。で、コミュニティの声を聞きますので、コミュニティが、したい方向にインターセクトも進むのが正しいと思っております。で、ご質問に関してなんですけれども、インターセクトのサイトからまだ見ることはできないんですけれども、今、インターセクトがそのレポートを今作成中なので、そのレポートには、いくら、今までいただいて、それはIOG とエマーゴが最初資金を入れたので、その資金を今までどういうふうに使って、どういう結果が出て、どういうカルダノに良い結果をもたらしたのかっていうのを、 詳しくレポートします。で、それに加えて、将来、どういう形で資金を使っていくのかというのを、レポートとして公開しますので、もう少々お待ちください。もうすぐ、3月中には公開される予定です。で、アダムディーンさんの方は、コミュニティのメンバーとしての意見なんですけれども、やはりそのインターセクトは不透明なところもまだ多いので、もっと透明にしていくべきという意見がありました。以上です。Yeah.
Okay, and yeah, Joe says, whatever the decision, please can the team have global representation so there is someone available in every time zone, because yeah, it's hard, the guys from CDON Labs are here joining us this weekend from Hong Kong, but I've been working with them to help with the scheduling of the events for Builderfest 2 coming up in Da Nang in Vietnam. And so I have to sometimes be up until midnight my time so that they're awake at like 7 their time, so we can have a meeting together. It's definitely a struggle that we're figuring out in this new global community that we have of how do we, and that's part of the big problem. I didn't know CDON Labs existed until a few months ago when I was preparing a report for Hydra and figuring out who was building on Hydra. And I did a search and I was like, oh, look, there's these guys from Hong Kong that are building a cool DeFi app on Hydra. And so the time zone and the language barrier is definitely makes it difficult for particularly people in underserved communities like Southeast Asia, like Australia and Africa, to have their voices be heard. And it's hard for us, in America and in Western Europe, I think, to get out of our bubbles and outside of our comfort zones. We kind of expect everybody to come to us on our time. And we really need to make a better effort to go to you on your time and hear you and ensure that you guys are part of the conversation as well. But I see another comment from Saman, and then we'll get to your comment, George, in just a second. After Tai Chi helps me with the tech, because I don't know how these apples work.
So thank you for Sarah-san for please keep going to the good work.
Yes, thank you, Sarah-san. And so we'll go to George. Give us just a second to do the mic and speaker swap.
All right, thanks, guys. I guess I'll ask the question both in Japanese and English so we can get both. All right, so 最初は日本語でいきます。日本は地震とか災害が多いので、なんかこれからなんかそのウォレットが例えばなんか災害が起きて自分のシードフレーズとかがもうなくされて30日とかまた60日、自分で1年間でもいいし、設定して、ログインされなかったら、そのままフィアットされて、自分の家族のなんか銀行口座に行くように行くとか、みたいなシステムができるのかなっていう質問なんだけど。But I'll ask in English. I don't know if the Japanese was all that good. But so I wanted to know if there's any thing in the works. I'm actually studying now on the Cardano Academy. I just signed up and I'm learning about it because I had an idea. In Japan, we have a lot of natural disasters, a lot of tsunamis, earthquakes. They're talking about Mount Fuji and all that. But I actually moved out to Okinawa and I lived in Tokyo for about 20 years. My brother's still out in Tokyo now, and I'm just thinking of so if we're still in the age of writing down our seed phrase for wallets and stuff. So I wanted to know if there's anything in the works to help us in that sense. Like if a natural disaster happens, it'll fiat what you have and send it to your loved ones, or some kind of system like that. appreciate it. That's it.
Okay, so I think there's a couple of solutions that are being explored that way, but we need to be still pragmatic about what are the solutions that exist and then what are the good solutions that exist. So first and foremost, there's a wide variety of companies that offer natural disaster resistant seed phrase backup. So this is where you're recording your seed phrase somehow on titanium or aircraft grade aluminum or stainless steel that you could then put inside of like a fire safe or whatever. And I mean, it may be not a volcanic eruption, but it'll probably survive most other things and get through there, because there are some other people that are researching things like biometrics and stuff, but then they always, at least right now, they're not mainnet ready yet. There's too many question marks on whether or not your biometrics will be the same, or people could impersonate them and gain access to your system. But I know wallets like Vesper and Lace and Begin, at least in the Cardano ecosystem, are taking this, get set up and get a wallet and get going first, and then get your seed phrase and back it up later, so you can onboard somebody kind of quickly and easily through their mobile device, and then tell them, hey, this is important, but you can do it later when you're somewhere safe. And then the other point of that I would touch on is that Cardano specifically, one of our criticisms that we heard yesterday during the workshop is that Cardano's slow, right? It takes like 20 seconds for a block time. But there's a reason for that, actually, and that reason is that we want the system to be able to operate on a very low network requirement, a very low computer requirement, so that pretty much anybody, anywhere could join and participate in the network, and they can validate blocks, and they could sync up a local full node network. So there's been a lot of these. I think what I'll dox him, Neil Davies, who's this brilliant PhD in networking, told me recently is that he was designing the Cardano networking layer to be able to survive all the way up to an asteroid hitting the planet. Like, unless we fully lose the internet, Cardano should survive. And even then, he said he had some contingency plans. So that's the kind of disaster-proof network that we're trying to build here. Not necessarily a go really fast and break things, but more how does this remain a durable, permanent store of value for the world well into the future. But yeah, I think you had a few.
Oh, I mean, there's also, if you're talking about just saving your seeds, Shamir sharding your keys. Ledger's a terrible example of this, because what they did was they said that they'll shard your keys for you and send it off to their custodians. But if you were to shard your keys, you could send them to your own places. Now, that's not necessarily easy for the average person to do, but it is a possibility. The other one would be you could get Lace Wallet and then make a Lace paper wallet with your PGP key. So you can make a PGP key, and then you could have your backup as your Lace paper wallet, put that in a fireproof safe or something. But you wouldn't even have to necessarily worry that much about it, hopefully. But yeah, that's about it.
All right, so we have a few questions in the chat from our Japanese community. So Taichi is working on our translations right now. And apologies, we're all getting lunch at the moment.
はい、ありがとうございます。英語が話せない人は置いてけぼりになっています。せっかく日本でイベントをするなら、また日本のフォルダに向けて発信したいなら、もう少し変えた方がいいです。ありがとうございます。そうですね。いや、本当、はい。太郎さん、ありがとうございます。そうですね。私自身も本当、英語、本当聞き取るの本当大変です。で、実際に海外の発信についていくのも大変。で、こちら質問いただいている、もう少しやり方を変えていかなければならないっていうところなんですけども、はい、もうまさしくその通りだと思っています。で、 そうですね、まずできることからとしましては、英語の翻訳を、この後も1時からの、イベントの際には AI 翻訳をかませて、実際に参加していただく方にも、言葉の壁を少しでも感じないようにできればというふうに、取り組みをしております。で、あとですね、発信のところですね。そうですね、今現状、イベントを発信できる場っていうのが、もちろん、私でしたらソーシャスの公式アカウントであったり、私個人のアカウント、セラのアカウントから投稿するっていうのが、ほぼほぼメインな形になってます。で、あとは、インターセクトジャパンハブですね、の公式アカウントからの発信も、ご協力いただいてしていただくということになってます。で、より広く、先ほどにも質問にあったんですけども、日本のエーダホルダーの方たちが、すべての方が SNS であったり、インターネットを使っているとは限らない。っていうのは、もう、とても私自身もよく分かっていることなので、そこをどうアプローチしていこうかっていうのは、もちろんソーシャスで、考えて行動するっていうのはもちろんなんですけども、私個人の意見としましては、やはりカルダノ、もう今ここに集まっていただいている方は、カルダノがどうやったら良くなっていくんだろう、どうしたら、この課題を解決することができるんだろうってことで、この貴重なお時間、日曜日いただいて、一緒に話す場を設けさせていただいていると思っております。ですので、積極的に私自身も皆さんとコミュニケーションを取っていかなければいけないと思っていますし、逆にそういった場を作ることが、今後非常に大きな課題だと思っておりますので、これはもう誰がやらないからとか、誰のせいだとかいうわけではなく、私たちはおそらく共通のカルダノに対するビジョンを持ってここにいると思っています。ですので、カルダノが今後より発展して、継続していくためにも、コミュニケーションというものは非常に重要だと思ってますので、小さなところからまず始めていくっていうのが、この2025年、もう正直な話、今までのものはもうすべてもう壊すでもいいと思ってます、個人的には。なので、力始めていく、これはみんなで取り組むべき大きな課題だと思ってますので、もちろんカルダノバジェットとかも大切なんですけども、私たちがどうコミュニケーションを取るかっていうのが、一番のキーポイントだと2025年思ってますので、はい、貴重な、アドバイス、ご意見ありがとうございます。私はいつでもオープンですので、いつでもご一緒にお話ができればと思っております。ありがとうございます、太郎さん。Yeah, this is all done. Yeah.
That was okay.
Yeah.
We already.
This one also I answered. Yes.
Okay. And I don't know if can you translate this comment from Joe?
ジョーさん、ありがとうございます。日本の方たちは、私たちも応援してくれて、のことも応援してくれています。とても感謝しています。しかし、それだけは解決策ではありません。そうですね。
All right, yeah. So we are getting lunch or trying to, I think. So oops.
Okay.
I broke it all. I think it opened a new window.
You opened a new window. Oh. It's just hidden behind the screen.
This yellow one, yeah. There we go. Okay, we're back. Okay.
All right, so we're gonna go lunch, right?
Sure.
Yeah. Okay. So we are going to lunch
30 minutes.
Yes, around 30 minutes. Japan time is from 1 p.m. That's why. So yes, next from 1 p.m. we are going to follow the agenda, and then we are talking about the discuss for the Cardano budget roadmap, right? That's why. So please come back to from 1 p.m. Thank you. はい、ありがとうございます。としましたら、30分間休憩取らせていただきたいと思います。で、1時ですね、1時ちょっと過ぎぐらいから、カルダのバジェットと、カルダのロードマップについて、今、こちらの会場にいる方たちと一緒に、ディスカッションしていきたいと思います。ですので、どうぞ30分後、どうぞ引き続きよろしくお願いいたします。ありがとうございます。
Katsu or
Two more questions.
Okay.
太郎さん、すいません。今、まだいらっしゃいますでしょうか。ごめんなさい。もう一度質問どちら誰か教えていただけますでしょうか。すいません。まだいらっしゃるかな。あ、これか。
Okay, so this is what we.
太郎さん、すいません。今。
You want to read the question?
はい。太郎さん、まだいらっしゃいますでしょうか。太郎さん。いないかな。いないか。そしたら、こちらの質問に対して、チャット文章で答えていただき、回答させていただきたいと思います。すいません。他にもし見逃しているものありましたら、教えていただけますと幸いです。見逃しているものありませんでしょうか。太郎さん。ちょっとこの後、お昼の時間でちょっと質問をすべてピックアップし、答えてないものをちょっと探し、ピックアップして、回答をお送りしたいと思います。はい。すみません、ありがとうございます。もし見逃してもらえれば、こちらチャット欄の方に引き続きお願いします。ありがとうございます。